we are joined by some colleagues who I'm going to introduce individually, who represent the Secretariat for the Cartagena Convention, as well as our official presence both in Haiti and in Guyana. This webinar, as I mentioned, is the first in a monthly series, and the idea behind these webinars is to initially find creative ways to stay connected with our local, regional, and international partners and reinforce our support to governments of the Caribbean. And particularly we want to highlight significant and trending environmental issues affecting the Caribbean subregion, as well as how we as UNEP work to resolve these issues. We also want to create awareness of the priorities and goals of the region and how UNEP is responding to them. Share some of the achievements in advancing towards environmental sustainability in the Caribbean. Provide a platform to showcase the collective work of UNEP through its various offices and various divisions that are working in the Caribbean. Also, we want to make sure that we understand what the issues are so that we can become as relevant as possible, and also advocate for governments and international development partners, as well as other stakeholders, to help UNEP in its work to promote environmental sustainability in the Caribbean. This first webinar is going to be somewhat general in nature, so we're not going to dig deep into all of the various aspects of our work, but we'll just give you a teaser, and then over the next few months, we hope to focus on various themes, including looking at preparations for World Environment Day, and then many of the sub-programs which we're going to talk about. So this is more or less an introduction, and we invite questions. You can enter your questions in the chat box, and one of our colleagues, Dion, is monitoring the chat box so that at the end of all of our presentations, we have some time for questions and comments. So I would like to start with an introductory presentation, and this is going to speak a bit about UNEP in general, and also speak to our work in the Caribbean. Can you just confirm that you're seeing my screen?
No.
So you're not seeing my screen. Okay.
Yes, now I am.
Now you are. Okay.
It just changed, actually.
All right. I hope you're seeing the screen that I'm seeing. Are you seeing a slide which says Introduction to UNEP?
No.
No, just your initials.
Okay, let me try again then. Share content. One more time. Are you seeing it now?
It says it's starting to share. There you go. Now we see it.
Okay. All right. Very good.
Thank
So
you.
everybody's on board now? You're seeing the home screen? Or the introduction to UNEP?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent.
Yes.
All right. Okay, well, as I mentioned, we want to use this first webinar as an opportunity to familiarize you with the broader organization in which we work, and also dig down into some of the specifics in our region, but not everything is going to be shared in one webinar. We have a few presenters, and we only have 1 hour for everything today. So what we want to try to do is give you a very brief introduction, highlight some of the projects and activities, and then I'll open it up for questions. Assuming that most of you joined this because you know something about UNEP, I just want to highlight that we are a global organization. We do set the global agenda and try our best to make sure that environment is implemented in the context, introduced in the context of sustainable development. Obviously, this event is one of the opportunities we see to advocate for its inclusion and for recognizing the importance of environment in terms of our own development. We are expected to provide leadership, and this leadership is done in many ways, including through partnerships. And as I mentioned, we use this webinar as one of the mechanisms to inform our various stakeholders. Based on what we are able to share today, we can identify opportunities for partnership and also possibly even inspire additional action from the various participants. Our history goes back to 1972, so we're actually closing out on 50 years. We should be celebrating in a couple of years' time. And we've evolved from what used to be a small governing council of only 58 members to a Universal Environment Assembly. And that only happened within the last 4 or 5 years, where all members of the UN are actually members of the UN Environment Assembly. So now everybody has a voice at the table when it comes to the deliberations of UNEP. We are located around the world. We are not as widespread as some of the UN agencies, but our headquarters is in Kenya, and we have regional offices in 6 regions, including Latin America and the Caribbean, and that office is based in Panama. But in addition to our Panama office, we have actually 2 offices here in Kingston. That's where I am coming to you from. You're going to hear from both of those offices. We have a sub-regional office in Uruguay for the Southern Cone. We have country offices in Brazil and in Mexico. We have a project office in Colombia, and then we have 2 other offices, and you're going to hear from both of those offices in a very short while. Those are from Haiti and from Guyana. In addition to the regional offices and our divisions and our headquarters, we actually administer a number of multilateral environmental agreements and also regional environmental agreements, and you're going to hear about that shortly as well. Some you might recognize as the CMS or IPBES, the Chemicals Convention, the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Convention, and the CITES Convention. Not everybody knows that UNEP has a responsibility for these conventions, so I just decided to put this slide in just to give you as broad a picture as possible of what we do. Not going to spend too much time on this slide, but we've taken a decision to try and strengthen our strategic regional presence, and this has been most recently informed by the Rio +20 conference, which led to the establishment of a number of sub-regional offices, one of which is for the Caribbean. And we also have responsibilities, for example, supporting ministerial forums. So in our region, we have the Latin American and Caribbean Ministerial Forum of Environment Ministers, which meets every 2 years, and they discuss issues of priority to the region, to the wider LAC region, and we serve as secretariat for that ministerial forum. Specifically, the office that I represent, which is the Caribbean Sub-Regional Office, it's a very small office, and deliberately so. But what we need to highlight is that we don't bring all of the resources from our office. It's a small office. We currently have 5 staff. Sometimes it goes up to 6 or 7, depending on the number of interns that we have. But essentially, we draw upon the entire organization. So we have regional coordinators for Latin America and the Caribbean based in Panama, and they are all available for the Caribbean. We have experts in Nairobi, in Paris, in Geneva, in other country offices. So we have an International Environmental Technology Center in Japan. So we have lots of expertise around the world which we're able to draw upon to service the region. And we report to our colleagues in the Panama office. Quickly, some of the things we do: we try to mobilize resources. We monitor and report on the progress of projects in the context of what the priorities of the Caribbean might be. We promote the joint collaboration with the rest of the UN family in the region, as well as strategic partnerships with other partners, and some of whom are on this call. And I don't want to single out anybody, but since I saw Wayne at the start from CWWA, they're one of our strategic partners. And of course, strategic outreach. And this is one of the reasons why we're having this series of webinars, in order to make sure that we share with the various stakeholders the work we are doing and get intelligence from them so that we can improve our programming. Our programming is focused on 7 what we call sub-programs or priority areas or focal areas, whatever is your preference. And in each of these 7 areas, we're going to focus our webinars in the coming months. But I just want to highlight the alignment between 6 of those 7 in particular with what we in the Caribbean have identified, we meaning the countries in the Caribbean, as development challenges. And these are part of what's called the Multi-Country Sustainable Development Framework. So for example, the Caribbean has identified inadequate natural resources management. It's identified limited adaptation to climate change. It's identified disaster risk reduction and mitigation as challenges, among others. And as you can see, the white boxes in this slide are all our sub-programs, and you can see that they are directly aligned with the development challenges in the Caribbean. We manage, as an organization, we manage well over 70 projects in the Caribbean. And just to give you an idea, some are global, of which the Caribbean participates, some are regional, meaning Latin America and the Caribbean, some regional, meaning either the Caribbean or the OECS, and some multi-country, which could be, for example, Belize and the OECS, as well as a number of national projects. These slides, which are going to be available to you, give you a sense of the kinds of projects we are implementing right now in various focal areas. We're looking at things related to biosafety, to biodiversity, ecosystem-based adaptation, action plans related to the Convention on desertification, on combating desertification. A lot of what we do relates to climate change, and this could include, for example, urban ecosystem-based adaptation, and even energy and energy resilience projects. Part of our effort includes also resource mobilization, and we have a portfolio of GCF projects under development in the Caribbean. That's Green Climate Fund projects under development in the Caribbean. As part of our response to the climate change challenges, we have a number of clean energy projects in the region, including, for example, a net zero energy building project that we're doing here with the University of the West Indies. We're looking at also cooling efficiency, impacts of the tourism sector on our energy demands, and also looking at government and institutional buildings and how we can improve their energy efficiency. Pollution, and particularly waste management, is one of our largest portfolios, and we're probably best known for that in the Caribbean. And I think Chris is probably going to tell you a bit about the work that the Secretariat does. But in addition to our waste management and pollution work, we are focusing on chemicals, and among those would include work to eliminate lead in paints, plastic waste minimization, persistent organic pollutants, as well as some publications of relevance to the region, one of which we've been circulating most recently, and I'll come back to that a little bit later. But we also look at mercury, and with the new Minamata Convention coming into force, we've been supporting countries with assessments related to that convention. This is one of our recent publications, which looks specifically at the needs in SIDS related to waste management, and it covers all of the SIDS in the Caribbean as well as other regions. And focus looks not only at the priority waste streams, but on approaches which include circular economy, and that is something which we are very strong on. Resource efficiency is one of the areas in which we actually focus a lot of our work, and the circular economy is one of those approaches. This slide I'm just putting up to ensure that I don't leave any of the important areas out, but Deirdre is going to speak about some other work we're doing on green economy, particularly in Guyana. Right now we have projects in Guyana and in Barbados, and we've done work as well in Jamaica, St. Lucia, and Haiti in the last few years. We also have a series of regional projects, as I mentioned, including, for example, technology needs assessments, national communications related to the Climate Change Convention. And as I mentioned already, we're looking at cooling efficiency and supporting governments in some respects with implementing new policies that will reduce or improve the energy efficiency of cooling infrastructure within countries. It would be impossible for me to have a presentation in a time like this without at least touching on COVID. UNEP's response to the COVID pandemic relates more to the the recovery phase, and building back better. And one of the things that that we have been looking at, in fact, in 2016, one of our flagship reports called the UNEP Frontier Report actually looked at the effects of biodiversity, or the impacts of reducing our biodiversity on zoonotic diseases, of which COVID is one such. So we intend to focus as we move forward on highlighting the importance of biodiversity conservation in the context of human health. And our executive director recently mentioned that our health of our planet is inextricably linked with the spread of diseases. Another area that we intend to focus on is waste management. I've already mentioned building back better. And historically, we've supported countries with technology selection and examination of difficult waste issues, including healthcare waste and disaster waste. And we already have in place guidance material, which can be found online, related to treatment of healthcare waste. So this is one of the areas in which we hope to be supporting as we move forward. So hopefully this has given you an idea of the breadth of work that we do. And I would invite next our colleague from the Cartagena Convention Secretariat, who is Mr. Chris Corbin, to give a bit more information on specifically what is done in relation to that convention. I'm just going to give you a very brief introduction to Chris. He is a program officer with the within the Ecosystems Division, in which the Secretariat for the Cartagena Convention is posted. This convention covers the countries of the wider Caribbean region, and Chris is particularly responsible for the marine pollution and communication sub-programs. He's going to be presenting on behalf of Dr. Lorna Innes, who is the executive secretary of that convention, and unfortunately she couldn't be here today. Chris has over 30 years of program and project management experience and technical training and environmental monitoring assessment, and he's recently coordinated or co-authored two quite significant reports. One is the State of the Convention Area Report on marine pollution in the wider Caribbean, and he co-authored the World Bank publication on pollution entitled Not a Minute to Waste. So I'm happy to invite Chris to share some information on the Cartagena Convention Secretariat and its work. Over to you, Chris.
Thank you very much, Vincent. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to all. I'm going to give just a brief overview of some of the work that UNEP is doing through the Cartagena Convention Secretariat, maybe by starting off with a bit of historical context. The Cartagena Convention Secretariat is one of the 18 UNEP administered regional SEAS programs. And these group of regional SEAS programs were launched as early as 1974. In 1981, the Caribbean Environment Program was established here in Kingston, Jamaica, as one of those regional SEAS programs, ultimately led to a legally binding agreement for the protection and development of the Caribbean Sea, known as the Cartagena Convention. And this has been enforced since 1986 and has formed the framework for a lot of our work in the region and with many of the countries and territories. The convention is structured along three major areas of focus, dealing with pollution from oil spills, the second dealing with the specially protected areas and wildlife, and the third on land-based sources of marine pollution. Each of these have been developed as technical sub-agreements to the Cartagena Convention, and they have been ratified by a number of countries within the region. Out of the 28 member states, 26 have ratified the convention and the oil spills protocol, 17 the SPOR on biodiversity, and 14 on land-based sources of pollution. In terms of regional activity centers, we also have some specialized centers which support the work of the protocols. A center hosted by the government of Curacao, RAC Rempatec, on oil spills. The SPORAC, hosted by the government of France in Guadeloupe. And 2 regional activity centers supporting pollution, the Institute of Marine Affairs in Trinidad and Tobago, as well as the Center for Engineering and Environmental Management based in Cuba. So fundamentally, we have been set up as a framework for promoting regional cooperation as it relates to the protection and development of the wider Caribbean region, with a major focus on the sustainable management and use of marine and coastal resources. Ultimately, a lot of our program, our projects and activities are aimed at supporting economic growth, sustainable livelihoods, but without compromising the coastal and marine resources that the Caribbean in particular are so dependent on. And as Vincent mentioned, there are several global and regional frameworks within UNEP, but also within the region that forms as a sort of a guide as to what we do at the regional level. UNEP as an organization has a medium-term strategy. As a grouping of regional Cs, we have also identified some regional strategic directions. The Sustainable Development Goals form a strong basis of alignment for the work that we do in our region. And most recently, through a JEF-funded project, Caribbean Large Marine Ecosystem, a strategic action program that looks at governance of the Caribbean Sea, fisheries, marine habitat, and pollution, has also been established. And that framework is forming a useful point of coordination for us as a secretariat with many other organizations in the region. As I mentioned, the Sustainable Development Goals are a significant part of our focus. And in particular, as a secretariat, we find ourselves working significantly in support of the goal dealing with clean water and sanitation. Vincent alluded to this as being one of the key areas of focus for UNEP, dealing with wastewater management and water resources management. We are working through many of our projects to support sustainable cities and communities, primarily by looking at issues of pollution, issues of ecosystem-based management, land use planning, climate change, not so much a focus of our office, but there's a critical cross-sectoral link between climate change and the issues of marine biodiversity and pollution. So all of our projects have built in a response to climate change, particularly as it relates to adaptation. But our core sustainable development goal is really on goal 14, relating to sustainable use of ocean, seas, and marine resources in general. The number of issues that we deal with are several, and as Vincent mentioned, I believe some of these we are going to in more detail as we go through these monthly webinars. But I wanted to just quickly highlight the bigger issues of marine habitat degradation, of pollution, of climate change, of overfishing, and of weak governance, which really form the framework of cooperation that we as a secretariat provide to member states, to countries in the region, while addressing some of even the more critical emerging issues, issues such as sargassum, issues such as microplastics, and of course, looking at how we, working along with several other partners, can support issues of governance. Our success factors, I think, have been based on 4 key areas, one being relating to information. Vince highlighted in his presentation some of the reports done by UNEP, and we have also done several monitoring and assessment reports relating to pollution, relating to marine habitat, and through our communication sub-program, trying to bring those messages out to our constituents. A key part of our work is also in terms of engagement and partnerships. I've looked at the participant list, and there are several organizations, both intergovernmental, non-governmental organizations, and private sector representatives that we work with. And many of our projects have focused very much on building capacity. Building capacity, for example, through trainers programs that we've done on marine protected areas. But through many of our projects, we've also targeted water utilities, we've targeted laboratories in the region to improve their capacity, and continues to be a significant driver for us. How do we resource mobilize? How do we set up innovative financial mechanisms? As mentioned, there are several projects, and Vince gave an overview of the number of projects that we're working on. I've just pulled out a few, and the reason I chose those was because all of them are funded by the Global Environment Facility, and it's really about how we've managed to utilize some of these these regional projects to maximize impact on the ground. And some of the persons might be familiar with some of these, a few of which focus specifically on small island developing states. I would highlight the Jeff IW CAM and now the Jeff IW Eco Project, which focuses on ecosystems management, land use, land degradation, pollution. So it's something we hope to continue to maximize use of as we continue to work to support governments in the region. And finally, in terms of how we are moving forward, and I was tempted to put in a COVID-19 slide as well, but I thought I could work it in here because the emphasis now really will be, as Vince mentioned, how do we build back better? How do we start taking some of the green and blue solutions that UNEP has been promoting? How can we work that into some of our programs and projects? Our focus will remain primarily on sustainable management of coastal and marine areas, but now we have to see how do we strengthen engagement with private sector? How do we work with countries to have them adopt a more blue-green economy approach, while at the same time dealing with issues of governance and issues of climate change, mitigation, and adaptation. So I want to end by thanking you for joining us, opening available for questions afterwards. And we're also trying to strengthen our presence on social media. So we encourage all of you to follow us on these various social media mechanisms and tools and outlets. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you for also keeping to the time. I think we're doing all right in terms of the time that should be available at the end for questions. And welcome to those who have joined us since we started. You are in the right place. This is the UNEP webinar, and it's the first in our series of webinars, which is featuring the work being done in the Caribbean by persons who are based in the Caribbean, as well as among our UNEP partners around the world. Our next presenter is going to be presenting on the work of UNEP in Haiti. And we are fortunate that Fabien Montaille, who is the head of the UNEP Haiti office, is able to come to us. He's actually coming to us from France. And Fabien, at this point in time anyway, he's normally based in Port-au-Prince. He brings to UNEP a wealth of experience from previously serving in the private sector in management and finance. And he's established several NGOs which have contributed to coral reef conservation and community-based development. Between 2007 and 2012, he advised the governments of Indonesia, Madagascar, and the DR Congo during climate negotiations. And additionally, he has worked for 10 years with UNDP and the World Bank, advancing climate change, REDD+, forest protection, agriculture, land use planning, and various interconnected sectors. He's only recently joined UNEP, but his experience, I'm sure, is being brought to bear almost immediately on the work we're doing in Haiti. So I'd like to invite Fabien to tell us about his work in Haiti. Over to you, Fabien. We're seeing your screen.
Yeah, but I can.
Would you like Sean to advance the slides? It seems like Fabian's having a little bit of a difficulty there. So while he's trying to sort that out, we could probably invite some questions for the first two presenters. If there is anybody who would like to pose a question.
Hi, Vincent. Vincent, I'm sorry. I was trying to unmute. I couldn't manage, but I can go back on the screen now.
Okay, we're hearing you very well, Fabian.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Vincent, for this very nice introduction, and good day to everyone. I'll try to be brief and just give you an overview of this program. As Vincent mentioned, I arrived only in last September, so it's been a bit more than 6 months now, and it's been quite some troubled time in Haiti. And actually, we started with almost 3 months of country lock due to some political turmoil and socio-economic crisis. So it's a bit, let's say that what we got with COVID-19 is actually, was actually some kind of, adding on to a quite challenging situation already. So basically, that's the context where I arrived. Just a quick word. I mean, as an introduction, I think it's worth emphasizing that the situation of Haiti is quite different, maybe from the rest of the Caribbean. There's quite a lot of common ground as well, of course. But the state of environmental degradation in Haiti is pretty high. There is basically less than 2% forest cover. It's absolutely dramatic. The impacts, obviously, of erosions and climate change and disasters, etc., are pretty high. Last major hurricane, Matthew, in 2017, basically claimed more or less 3,000 toll. It's very high. A lot of vulnerability, and basically the country is in poverty trap. It's been more or less 30 years, and basically GDP per capita is not, in real term, is not increasing. There's been, before COVID-19, 2019 was already a year of economic recession. Despite the fact that Haiti is among the least developed countries. And the prospects from the World Bank were still staying into recession in 2020 and 2021, and this was before COVID-19. In this context, it's pretty challenging, and actually the history of UNEP in Haiti might be quite different from the rest of the continent and the Caribbean in particular. It started in 2018 after basically a post-conflict environmental assessment that was led by the Crisis Management Branch, which is run in Geneva. So basically, I am directly reporting to Geneva, and I'm part of the Crisis Management Branch. Though, due to the geographical position, of course, I'm closely coordinating actions with Vincent in Kingston and in Panama as well, in the ROLAC office. We have two offices in Haiti, one in Port-au-Prince, capital, one in Port-Salut, which is on the southwest tip of Haiti. And we have 11 people, 3 international, 7 national, 8 technical experts manager. Basically, it's a very lean team, and we try to work mainly with staff who are both basically technical experts on some topic and project managers. And we work a lot through implementing partners. So that's a reason why we have little administration, finance, and logistics sites, etc. And we work a lot with UNOPS and sometimes with UNDP on implementing activities and operations. we try to develop some strategic response at country level on environment. We have a very strong flagship engagement at the moment on the concept of integrated rural resilience, which is really crafted as a response to Haiti's most acute challenges at the moment. From an environmental point of view, we talk obviously about mainstreaming environment. Environment is a small budget as part of international support, but also obviously as part of national resources. And we need to work with other sectors to mainstream environmental objectives into their different sectorial targets. We also try to work on changing mindset, which is challenging in the country where actually short term is often the priority. And there are a key aspect on capacities to scale up action. So we are not, we are acting on the ground, but we are not trying to engage into large projects and large infrastructure projects. We are more focusing on innovation and demonstration stage, and try then to build capacities for all the partners to take over and take things to scale. Our operating model is then focusing on services, field implementation only in targeted area, which is the south, what we call the Great South area, which encompass 2 departments in the Sud and Grand Anse, and focusing on innovation and team. Basically, that's what we are trying to do. We have a portfolio of 5 projects at the moment for a total of something like 20 million, roughly $20 million. This is basically the control panel with our key donors. I will just go through quickly each of them. I just want to emphasize at this level that we have general advisory role and partnership development on top of these projects, supporting the government of Haiti, of course. Coordination of donors platforms in the country. So we are kind of offering a platform at country level to the other partners engaged in environment. So, I mean, can be like AIDB, can be the World Bank, UNDP, and some embassies, European Union, France, Japan, etc. We support the UN country team and the humanitarian country team on collective and individual agendas. Still in this effort to mainstream environment into the different agendas, including humanitarian response. Supports UNEP projects managed outside. So this is also echoing what Vincent was mentioning of this multi-layer structure of projects, and some coming from the headquarters, some from different regions, etc. So we have quite a lot of projects which are actually implemented from outside, from UNEP outside Haiti, and we try to build some coherence across this project. And also an important thing I want to mention is support capacity building to local partners. So we try to, I mean, we've been engaging with many implementing partners, including at field level, including obviously authorities, and we try to, gradually build capacity so that they can take over. And we have some success on that field as well. 5 projects, time is running fast, so I won't be too long. We basically have three projects. I mean, here you have a bit more details. Of course, this will be shared, so you can get down to that. We have the 3 first projects, one funded by Norway. Then we have sustainable value chains funded by the French cooperation. And then we have, okay, here we have a problem, sorry, up. And then we have a project funded by the JEF. The 3 projects that I mentioned, I just go very, very briefly across the 3 of them because they are all very, very intertwined. The 3 of them are focusing in the south. They are run by our office in Port Salut. And the 3 of them are actually engaged in cross-cutting issues related to ecosystem restoration setting up new protected areas, supporting these protected areas with designing management plans, with building capacities, with protection like training rangers, restoration of ecosystem, mangroves, coral reef, riverbanks, watersheds, etc. There's naturally an aspect on ecosystem-based adaptation, and so taking us to livelihoods, and local people's livelihoods are mainly around fisheries and agriculture. So looking at value chains, we have a project funded by the French who focus on cocoa and the vetiver value chains. We also work on other approach and cross-cutting agriculture approach like agroforestry and obviously agroecology. And so all of that is really integrated, and there are obviously classic components of this type of projects, including capacity building of the institutions, of the local partners, empowerment of local communities, science-based support and science support on studies. We have some landmark studies on green economy, on green supply chains, for example, and green value chains in the agriculture sector in the region, etc. So this is just to kind of package the three projects. And two more specific projects. We have a small capacity building project to support the government, actually the central government in Port-au-Prince, in implementation of all the multilateral environmental agreements. And so through this project, we've been supporting, for example, the establishment of the Haitian Biodiversity Fund, which which is a trust fund, which now received pledges for $26 million. So that is meant to be an instrument of financial sustainability for the protected areas in Haiti. We are also working on designing an environmental information system. We have the first version coming on air in a couple of months. We produced a documentary, pretty striking documentary on the relationship between the Haitian people and the sea. And we developed methodological guides and strategic environmental impact assessment for specific ecosystems. So that's the type of project that we develop in support to the national, the central government and Ministry of Environment. And we have a last project on sustainable energy. It's basically about establishing a community-based, community-led, off-grid, mini-grid mixing generator and photovoltaic in a very remote part of Haiti, still in the southern coast. This is almost complete, and of course we've been quite challenged by COVID-19 and the situation, the trade situation there. I just conclude with a few key opportunities and challenges. We have long entrusted, this position as having a country program in UNEP, particularly in this kind of very challenging place and coming out from this crisis and disaster post-conflict approach is pretty challenging, but it's also building quite a few opportunities, including now we have long entrusted relationship with the authority. That's ideal to really push some agendas. We have improved capacities of historical local partners. So we started with some local, farmer organization, fisherman organization, and now we have some organization on the ground. We can start working with other partners, and we are pretty much praised for that, because now when the EU or the World Bank or etc. and UN colleagues, they want to work in this area. We arrived 10 years ago, there was basically no one really working there, and now they have a network of local NGOs and local cooperatives, etc., who they can work with, and that's very, very useful. We have robust national team and knowledge of cultural, political factors to manage a project. And lately we as a Caribbean Development Bank approaching us, for example, to help them unlock a project they have in the South Department. This is a type of things that where we can really add value to our partners. Strategic direction and approach to leverage individual project design and impact, so to give consistency, for example, across these questions of integrated landscape resilience and rural landscape resilience, for example, and that's taking shape at the moment. We are an entry point to deploy multiple UNEP expertise at national and subnational level. Concrete experience on influencing humanitarian and development agenda, mainstreaming environment and decision-making level, ability to support advice. And this, I just say a word here. Actually, we have a seat at UNCT and HCT, of course, but beyond having a seat, it's important to have the capacities to influence, and that often means that it's not only about technical advice or policy advice, it's about, I mean, how can you mobilize a capacity behind that, beyond that, to really mobilize capacities and sources, etc., to turn your advices into reality and concrete demonstration and pilots, etc. And I think that's an important experience of this kind of settings and UNEP settings in country. Trusted special relationship with Norway. This is actually echoing the first point in my challenges, which is financial vulnerability. We have 5 projects, but 2 out of them are funded by Norway, and they are actually our most flexible and most, I would say, most trusted donors at the moment, and we really rely on them. So it's also a factor of vulnerability. We are quite challenged by our operating and administrative framework in which we operate. And definitely working on implementation of projects on the ground is sometimes challenging on that, from that aspects, and including procurement and all these things. We go around that by working a lot with implementing partners and keeping focused on a very strong and lean team of experts. Capacities to coordinate and harmonize UNEP action at country level. This is something that we need to keep working on, and it takes energy. And I mean, today is a good illustration of what we're trying to do on that field. And thanks, Vincent, for this opportunity. Of course, we are also highly impacted by social political instability, COVID-19, etc. There's donor fatigue as well to Haiti that is important to note, and there's a major gap between the needs and financial opportunities and interest. Environment ranking low in national and general public priority, and basically Haitian people look at environment as a source of disaster, as a threat. And changing mindset to turn that into environment as opportunities is something that is quite challenging. And there's a lot of history behind that, of course, and there's a lot of work to do to advocate for that and to demonstrate that. And weak technical capacities of partners is also a challenge we're trying to work globally. Well, that's, sorry, I've been a bit long, I think, but that's an overview of what we're doing in Haiti.
Great. Thank you very much, Fabian. I've been looking at the chat box while you've been making your presentation, and there's clearly a lot of interest that has been generated during your presentation on the work in Haiti. We don't have as much opportunity to hear about what's going on in Haiti, so we really appreciated your information sharing. We're going to quickly move on to our final presenter, who is Deirdre Sherland, and Deirdre serves as a coordinator for our project office in Guyana. And it's a very interesting time in Guyana. I suppose some of you are aware of that. But right now we are trying to oversee the development of the country's national development strategy, as well as the Partnership for Action on Green Economy policy reform activities. And Deirdre has been with UNEP off and on for quite a number of years. She's been with the tourism program in Paris, and she led a global tourism partnership. And in addition to her work in tourism, she has vast experience working in not only the Caribbean, but other parts of the world, advising governments, the private sector, donor, and nonprofits on environmental issues in a variety of sectors, including everything from mining to infrastructure to national parks. So we're very happy to have Deidre to present on the work in Guyana, and then we're going to open up for questions. Over to you, Deidre.
Thank you very much, Vincent. And I'm relying on Sean to advance the slide, and I'm going to ask him to move to the next slide right away. Very conscious also of the great appetite and the range of questions that we are already getting. So I'm going to try to do the impossible and to move through this presentation as quickly as possible. And in the backdrop of some of my slides, you'll see some images of Guyana, which should indicate a green theme as well as the vastness of the country. So my presentation is just about in three parts. It's designed to be very short. A little bit about Guyana for those who don't know, and of course, I'm going to focus a little bit on UNEP's activities and then present a range of opportunities. But I do want to say that a lot of what Vincent presented in the opening, as well as Fabian and Chris in their presentation, it applies here in terms of UNEP's work, its approaches, its focus on the SDGs, and so forth, even if you don't see the detail here in the slides. Next slide, please, Sean. So a little bit about Guyana, and for those who don't know, it's set, of course, on the north coast of South America. It's bordered by Venezuela, Brazil, and Suriname as its immediate neighbors and so on. And it's the only land mass within a continental setting amongst CARICOM countries, very rich in natural resources. They're listed here. Oil and gas, recently found gold and bauxite and diamonds, and they've been in those trading areas for some time. And the key export sectors are also in these minerals, in raw form, unfortunately, as well as in rice and sugar historically, and timber and forest-based products. The not so good news, and especially following Fabien's presentation, is small population, only about 740 odd thousand people. Relatively low HDI, Human Development Index, is the second lowest in the Caribbean after Haiti. Poverty is relatively high, about a third of the population, and these figures, the poverty figures, are from 2006. There is another survey that's being done or conducted now, or will be conducted shortly. And many people feel that even though the figures are coming down, they're coming down a little bit too slowly. Extreme poverty is a little too high at about a fifth of the population. So is unemployment, and a relatively high proportion of the sector is informal. And as I mentioned, it's the second poorest country in the Caribbean after Haiti, but you would never guess it because of the abundance of these key natural resources. Next slide, please, Sean. So basically, UNEP's activities started, I would say, in earnest, notwithstanding some of the projects that have been going on regionally and involves Guyana. It started basically in a focused way through the work that started on the vision of the government of Guyana as a green state. And you would have seen in the previous two slides some of the pictures that show this abundance of green, which if you fly over the country, I mean, it's so evident. And His Excellency the President, only in the second year of their 5-year term back in 2017, has this vision, or had this vision, of the green state. And it was very easy to match that with the green economy and objectives of the green economy. So they signed an agreement in 2017, and UNEP established a project office in Georgetown. Guyana became, most importantly, a member country under the Partnership for Action on Green Economy. And then we started to put together the Green State Development Strategy, which is the title that was chosen by the administration for its national development strategy, based on an integrated, inclusive green economy agenda, resilience, low carbon emissions, and of course, people-centered. Next slide, please. Next slide. All right. So basically, this slide here, it's quite dense, and it's intended to show some level of depth and breadth of the content of the activities that surrounded the putting together of the Green State Strategy. So this activity went on in earnest for about 9 months, really beginning in January of 2018, and a first draft of the strategy was put together in October and submitted to the then cabinet. And I want to stress that UNEP could not have done this without its partnership approach. And we had very good partnerships with, of course, the funder, which is the Guyana Red Plus Investment Fund, or the GRIFS Secretariat, which is supported in part by the government of Norway as well. Of course, the Ministry of the Presidency was the lead agency, and we worked and reported through the Department of Environment. Of course, our project office is located there. And of course, we worked with the international NGOs, which are best represented and have a long track record of work here in Guyana, which are WWF and, of course, Conservation International, and, of course, University of Guyana, as well as some other stakeholders which were represented and participated in this, in the multi-stakeholder expert group phase of it. Now, the vastness of the country and the effort to do consultations across the country really involved a lot of these partners. And we're very, very appreciative of the support and the good relationship that we continue to enjoy with these partners. And on the right-hand side of this slide is what the Green State Development Strategy looks like. It was presented by necessity in 3 volumes, the third of which is the concluding part, and that presents the cost estimates and the M&E framework, which is just being finalized now. But the main policy recommendations and implementation, as well as the annexes in volumes 1 and 2, were presented to the government of Guyana last year in May. Next slide, please. But you can appreciate the level of effort that went into putting this together. And the PAGE program, the Partnership for Action and Green Economy, supported the initial phase of the development and elaboration of the Green State Strategy, with the focus on economic modeling, essentially, in terms of modeling the impact of implementing green economy initiatives. And basically it found that for every dollar invested, the payback is 4 times as much, which would surprise nobody who works in this business. But basically the Guyana work program of PAGE involves these 5 UN agencies in partnership, only one of which, UNDP, is resident here in Guyana. But these are some of the studies, and I won't run through all of them, but these are some of the areas and the thematic areas that we're currently working, and some of the future work projections that we're looking at. And of course, we're working through a multi-stakeholder advisory committee, which is very important in Guyana's context in terms of ensuring that the work is relevant, that there's buy-in, country buy-in, and that all stakeholders have a seat at the table and a voice in terms of the work. And it's also, it might be unique to Guyana as well as to the Caribbean, but it's required in the Constitution, consultation on projects and national development and so forth. Next slide, please, Sean. But what the PAGE agenda is a reform agenda, which is very much consonant with the agenda of the Green State. But our office, as a project office, works also with the UN system. And here I show in very, very summarized form the ambit of work of the UNRC office, essentially, and they have the typical number of UN country team coordination groups, and our staff participates in it. I participate in the UNCT meetings, and I have staff participate in the administration groups as well as communication. We collaborate with each of the agencies as well in terms of resource mobilization, working together on proposals. And of course, now it's become, everything has been upset by COVID-19, and there's also a response and a recovery component of the work that we're participating in terms of a finance and economic recovery group in which UNEP is participating and lending its voice. Our work, as has been said by the previous speakers, is more relevant to the recovery side of things. Moving to the next slide quickly. And this is the final slide. I've just identified some opportunities here, but if you remember the presentation of Fabien in Haiti, a lot of the challenges are also represented here in Guyana from a political standpoint as well as a geographic standpoint. But I have framed out the opportunity and the work that is left to be done, and I have sort of narrowed the scope here to the particular activities that UNEP is best positioned to do. But there's many other dimensions of this that the other UN agencies are participating in. And I framed it out in terms of managing this country's vast array of natural wealth, and its human and institutional capital, which is a little bit weak, a small population. They really have capacity issues. And these themes that I've laid out in terms of the premier resource, land, and all the sub-themes under there, industry and infrastructure, they really need some strong policy responses, as well as a concerted effort into resource mobilization. And I think that these are presenting some of the immediate opportunities available to UNEP, and there are others that UNEP can participate with in partnership with some of the other UN agencies. So conscious of the time, I'm sorry about the length of it. There's a whole other dimension and a lot of content here, but I will leave it at that, and I would welcome your questions, and thank you for listening. Over to you, Vince.
Thank you very much, Deirdre, and thank you to all of the presenters, as well as all of you who are online for sticking it out. This is our first webinar, and I think we've maintained the interest throughout. We started in the 50s, we got up to almost 80, and I think we're down to about 75 right now. But we're going to try to answer a few of the questions. Quite a few were posed online, and some have been responded to. I know Chris Corbin had to leave, and he's made a couple responses to some of the questions. But fortunately, Lorna Innes, who I mentioned at the top of the show, has been able to join us, and she's available for questions as well. I've been trying to monitor the questions, and there's really four areas that I would want to focus on initially, and maybe invite some of my colleagues to respond. The first has to do with coordination of our work and duplication of effort, and there was a question about how that is coordinated, and if there is any effort to avoid duplication. Deirdre touched on it just now in one of her last slides in terms of how we work within the UN, and we try as best as we can to coordinate our efforts, particularly for national projects within the context of the UN country team, and more regionally within the context of what's called the Multi-Country Sustainable Development Framework, which I mentioned in one of my slides when I showed the alignment between our sub-programs and the Caribbean priorities. We also support right now the development of country implementation plans or sub-regional implementation plans in the 6 UN country teams or UN sub-regional teams throughout the English-speaking Caribbean. Fabien mentioned that they are also aligned with the UN country team in Haiti. So our efforts, including working with various donor groups, for example, Eastern Caribbean has a donor group, and working with partners such as the OECS and CARICOM to ensure that we have an understanding of what's going on and what is being done in response to that. Those are the efforts that we make to avoid duplication and try to facilitate coordination. We do have access to all of the information, obviously, on the various projects that were mentioned. And our office in Kingston keeps a database of projects in which UNEP is involved. And I'm sure that could be made available to the persons who are expressing an interest in that. And I think Chris also, in his response in the chat box, mentioned some of the other work that's being done in terms of trying to capture all of the various work that is ongoing. In terms of the modalities for how we expect to work in this new environment, bearing in mind COVID and its impact on our work. As an organization, we've been moving towards a lot more virtual meeting, trying to reduce our carbon footprint. And we have online tools, including Microsoft Teams, Skype for Business. And we also have been coordinating among ourselves within UNEP and within UN country teams, with our headquarters, with the UN Secretariat, through various mechanisms, including town hall meetings, series of extraordinary UN country team meetings, and special meetings of COVID coordinating teams that are responding. And I think Deirdre mentioned that as well. And a question was raised about how we are responding in terms of reprogramming of resources. And yes, indeed, we are looking very carefully at how we can reprogram resources that currently exist or mobilize additional resources respond to the various challenges that we are going to be facing or we currently face in regard to COVID. And among those would include trying to facilitate more greening of jobs. And I think Deidre also mentioned that in her response. I'm going to stop there and invite my colleagues to respond to those two questions. And then specifically, there was a question on sargassum, which Chris had started to respond to. Lorna may wish to add to that. And then there was a specific question on Haiti, which we'll invite Fabian to respond to a little bit later on. So maybe Deidre, you can start, and then we'll invite the others.
Thank you, Vince. And in respect of the overlap, I mean, that's a constant question here in Guyana and amongst UN country team colleagues and partners. And the whole purpose of sitting in a UN country team is exactly to do that, to find out who's working where, who's working on what, how we can collaborate, to stay within our travel lines and to cooperate as best as possible, because I think everybody agrees that individually we will have less impact than if we work collaboratively. And given the vastness of this terrain here in Guyana, and the difficulty of working in some of these very, very remote locations, some of the agencies have the capacity and they have the infrastructure to actually get to these remote areas, as well as some of our partners. So here in Guyana, the need for cooperation and reduction of overlap and duplication of effort it takes on a greater importance simply because of those factors. Over to you.
Thanks, Deidre. I'd invite Lorna to come in and in addition to responding to sargassum, she may have some other points she wishes to raise. Thanks, Lorna, for joining us. I know you have competing priorities right now, so we welcome you even only for a short while. Over.
Thanks, Vincent, and I appreciate the opportunity. Good afternoon to all. Nice to hear you, Deirdre, and others. Yes, Ileana is also on the call, and I don't know if she has anything additional to add with respect to the sargassum. We really welcome the level of interest in the sargassum program, and really invite persons who are interested to get in touch with the Secretariat and join the working group that has been set up among country representatives to try to address this issue. It is not the easiest issue because the solutions are not immediately apparent. And so, the more people that we have on board to address the issue, I think the closer we will get to a workable solution for the countries that are being affected. I want to just address also the issue of the online meetings. Right now, that's the only modality we have, but I have a feeling that going to these online meetings is going to change the way we do business in general. We love to pack our bags and travel, but from a climate change perspective, also from a resource perspective, and the fact that almost all of the agencies and organizations and donors are saving money now on travel, I have a feeling that we may not be going back to business as usual. The reason I mention this is just to raise your attention to the fact that I couldn't begin this webinar on time because today and yesterday I was in a regional workshop on the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, and ordinarily we may have had 50 persons meet in Mexico City for that meeting. And because it was online, we had over 400 people at the workshop, and it was fantastic. The way, and we didn't lose anybody because we had 2 half days. So I see that going forward, we really need to make sure that we get with the technology. We need to push our regional communications providers to give us the speed and the bandwidth that is required to make sure that we can participate fully, because I think that this is going to be the way of the future. We are happy to take additional questions. please do email us at the Cartagena Convention Secretariat. We do have a functioning website, and I believe it was at the end of Chris's presentation. Vincent, there was a question as to whether the talks would be available. So I will leave that one for you as well. Thank you very much.
Yes, thanks. Thanks for that, Lorna. And certainly any follow-up, we would welcome it. You can communicate with us via the channels that would have invited you to this event, or certainly you can find information on all of us online. So we would welcome that. I'd like to invite Fabian very quickly, and thanks to those who have stuck around. We've gone over an hour, but it's our first, and we're learning as we go along, and we probably won't try to pack as much into the next one, and hopefully manage our time a bit better. But in terms of the questions on Haiti, and more generally, there was a question about the landscape and rural resilience, and also about the EBA project. So in addition to what else you've seen online, Fabian, maybe you can respond to those questions. Over.
Okay, thanks, Vincent, and thanks everyone for the questions. I try to be brief, so just, feel free to connect after to go deeper into the questions. Just very briefly then, regarding project duplication, actually, if you consider the area that we try to cover and to support, and the number of people, etc., I mean, we are very, very overstretched. Actually, it's very small. So the risks of overlap are not actually there. It's actually, we overlap in terms of topics, for example, ecosystem-based adaptation, but we're working in different communities, and we try to cross feed. So when we have expertise on one field, we try to cover different communities with different money, but it's not like duplication. What we're doing on the national level, I mentioned at some point that we established this sectorial, like environmental sector group, which is a group of partners, and we meet usually once every 2 months. And as part of that group, we update on a regular basis. We update a database of all the projects of all the partners. So that's basically the major tool that we have to make sure that we don't overlap, and to try to build more cooperation across our agencies and institutions. Regarding there was a question on the trust fund. It's all it's an independent trust fund. It's not managed by UNEP. It's not managed by the government. Civil society is well represented. We have actually UNEP currently is supporting the Nature Conservancy to work on all the operating instruments. And there is a commitment, as I said, for the moment, there is commitment of, I think, $26 million. And this is a trust fund. So basically, this will be revolving and producing. We expect to have a first call for projects that would go something around $1 million for the next round. And regarding those questions on addressing COVID-19, and first we have a business continuity plan is in place, which is basically quite resilient, and we're quite experienced in Haiti on that. It's basically everyone working from home, duty of care for our implementing partners on the field. Obviously, public events, etc. We managed to continue about 90% of our activities. So it's not, for example, we are not renegotiating with our donors or redeploying activities, because basically, livelihood and all the activities that we're doing are providing direct supports to beneficiaries, to local people, and this is actually what they need at the moment. On top of sanitary response, they also need. There is major risk of very serious humanitarian crisis, and so actually, what we found out is what we're doing is basically directly answering what is needed at the moment, and obviously, we use our activities and presence on the field to convey all sanitary, precautionary and protection measures. For example, we've been spreading like 1,000 hand washing points across the different communes where we work, where we have project activities on livelihoods or restoration, etc. So basically, there is, in terms of business realignment, I mean, COVID-19 is basically doing quite the opposite. It's kind of confirming our model, and that is useful, including for crisis time. And I think successful ecosystem-based adaptation for coastal community, I think what we're doing now is actually quite successful. The problem is it's very small scale when you look at, you know, all the needs, and you know, like, I mean, we have a few $1 million projects. We are talking about 11 million people population with basically something like 45 to 50% of the population in need of humanitarian assistance at the moment, before COVID-19 stroke. So that gives you a glance of the efforts. I mean, we are really a drop in the ocean, and what we are trying to do is actually just to demonstrate the concept, so then it's being scaled up. I think, for example, one thing that UNEP introduced in Haiti is a reach to reef approach that was back to the 2014, and with a few studies on green value, on sustainable value chains, and this has picked up actually, and now we see reach to reef projects being promoted by different NGOs and different organizations, and this is actually something that we can put on our credit. So it's not perfect, definitely not, but it's not so much an issue of duplication and lack of cooperation. It's an issue of being a drop in the ocean, and trying to find ways to scale up at the moment. I would see that as a priority. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fabian. We've gone 15 minutes over time, so I think we probably would want to wrap up now. I haven't seen any additional questions come up, but some helpful comments. One suggestion that we could possibly go an hour and a half rather than an hour. We'll have to think about that. Suggestions that we could even could have the speakers' faces on camera. Some of us probably don't look presentable, so we decided to err on the side of caution. But I want to, before we say goodbye, I wanted to thank everybody for your interest. I mean, for our first webinar, we got over 80 people signed on, which was extremely encouraging, and we still have almost 60 people online. So clearly there was a lot of interest, and we'll be continuing these the last Wednesday, I think, of every month. But you'll be advised. Please let your colleagues know about the upcoming webinars. Thanks to, in addition to the participants, to those who presented, Lorna especially for coming in at the very end of another meeting. I know she's been extremely busy. Fabian, Deirdre, Chris, and also our IT and promotional staff, Sean Cheddar and Dion Smith. Dion, it's a brainchild of Dion, so a special thanks to her. Thanks again to those who posed questions. We look forward to speaking with you all again. And my final word would be to please keep safe, and take care of yourselves and your families. And we'll talk again very shortly. Over and out.